Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it.
All right, everybody. I have today on the line Grace Taylor, and she is a serial expat originally from Canada, but after living in 4 countries, she is now in Dublin. She is an accountant that started working with the Big Four, but has since gone into business by herself and is offering services to help individuals design their ideal lives through personal finance. And this is something we talk about a lot. We like to hear about how we can save money on taxes. We want to save money on taxes as location-independent entrepreneurs and workers, and how does that work into the kind of the international business scheme that we've got today, and all the laws and things are changing, and we can now take advantage of some of the benefits of being international that a lot of it's only been available for wealthy people, but now a lot of individuals can take advantage of this stuff. And so we want to talk to Grace about that today. So Grace, thanks for coming to the podcast.
Thanks, James. I'm super excited to be here.
So you were originally from Canada, but you have worked with Americans. I believe you lived in Seattle, you said. So we're going to talk a little bit about maybe, Canadian and American taxes, just so people don't think that you are, you only work with Canadians, you also work with Americans. How does that work? So you are certified to work in both countries?
Well, in fact, actually, I only specialize in U.S. tax. So I transferred to the University of Washington partway through my degree. So I graduated from that university in Seattle, got a job with one of the Big Four firms working in Seattle, and I spent most of my career there. So I specialize exclusively in U.S. tax for Americans living and working abroad, as well as non-U.S. persons coming into the U.S. to work. So it's a pretty specialized niche area of tax, but that's one of the things that I kind of want to share with your audience is the fact that if you are one of these people that, as you say, has the unique ability to take advantage of some of these specific kind of expat tax rules, what you really want is you want someone who dives deep into that specialty. So I personally don't know that many people out there that are specializing in multiple countries' expat taxes, just because they are so specific to each particular country.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like, you can get really complicated with it because each country has, they have their own laws and they kind of overlap and things like that. I'm always kind of suspicious of how, there's like one person that can know how to, internationalize into all these, different countries all over the world. It just seems, it's very complicated, especially when you have personal plus corporate tax and all this type of stuff. So,
yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, so obviously there's a lot to unpack there, but yeah, you definitely get, and I think that a lot of the guys that are out there kind of doing kind of internationalization consulting, if you will, a lot of those guys are very knowledgeable, but when you want someone to actually give you specific tax advice or to actually prepare your tax forms, you need someone who is specialized in that country, who's certified to practice before the tax authorities in that country. And I personally just don't know that many people out there that would have, certified in Canada and the UK and Australia and the US. Like it's not that common, even though it would be nice to be able to say, yep, I've got one guy that does all my taxes everywhere I need. I personally just don't see that out there.
Okay, great. So I wanted to ask you about something kind of relevant right now in the news, and that is this tax plan right now that's going in the United States. I mean, I guess it's still going through, they're working it out and all that type of stuff. Is there anything specifically that you've seen in there that would be relevant to expats or individual entrepreneurs or something like that, or are we just not sure what it's going to look like now, the U.S. Tax plan?
Yeah, I do think it's a little bit early to say, and I know that there has been some thought leadership out there in advance of it, a lot of it by kind of the Big Four firms, which I think I have a lot of really respect. There's a lot of talented people out there working on that, so people can go and look up that. I don't think there's anything that that's going to be of particular note to expats. One thing that I've seen, and it kind of perennially comes up, but I personally don't see it getting that much traction is, and we can talk a little bit about this, but the U.S. has this unique citizenship-based taxation, which
we know all
some
about
of your
it.
listeners will be familiar with. Yeah. And what we sometimes hear kind of Americans abroad, expat groups lobbying for is a change to residence-based taxation, which would bring the U.S. in line with most other countries, but I don't really see it gaining a lot of traction. These are small, kind of very specialized and niche groups out there that would like to see this happen, but it just doesn't have the national clout, I don't think, to ever in the near future to really gain any momentum.
Yeah, I saw a few articles. There was maybe it was about 3 weeks ago or something like that. I saw some articles going around saying that they were considering changing that over, but you never know what's true or not or what's going on nowadays with some of the news that comes out. But a lot of people were kind of hopeful that they were actually seriously looking into that, but I don't think they're actually made into the bill. So,
and it is really fair to say that we don't know what's going to happen, especially in the current climate. So we'll keep an eye on movement in that space. But for now, I think that we can expect that at least in the near future, Americans will be faced with the ongoing need to report worldwide income and to file a tax return every year, which, as you say, your audience is probably familiar with. And I don't know if you wanted to kind of dive into any of the specifics on that, which we certainly could do.
About the foreign income tax exclusion?
That's it. Yeah. Just because I think that there's a lot of potential either incomplete information or occasionally outright misinformation.
Okay, great. Yeah, let us know what you think.
Yeah, super. So as I said, one of the first things I always like to delineate for people is a lot of the advice that's out there for digital nomads. If it's not specific to Americans, it's really not applicable to them. And the reason is because, as we said, if you're a U.S. citizen or a U.S. green card holder, you have an ongoing obligation to report 100% of worldwide income, no matter where you live, no matter where you work, no matter what source it's from. And that never goes away as long as you have that U.S. citizenship or hold that U.S. green card. But that being said, as again, you and a lot of your audience will be familiar with, there are particular expat rules that Americans living abroad can potentially take advantage of if they're managed correctly. And the most commonly talked about out there would be the Foreign Earned Income Exclusion, FEIE abbreviated. And that is the ability to exclude up to a certain amount of non-U.S. source income, earned income per year from federal income tax. So there's a little bit to unpack there, but at a high level, that's how it works. But the only way that people can qualify for this is really if they, we can dive into the specifics of the tests, but primarily if you don't spend the vast majority of your year outside the U.S., you're not going to qualify for that. So sometimes I get people asking me, oh, well, I'm becoming a digital nomad, but I'm really going to be traveling around the U.S. And so that all of these rules don't apply to you. This is really for people that are spending the majority of their year outside of U.S. soil.
Okay, and it's my understanding that to take advantage of that, you actually have to be, you don't necessarily have to, well, you need to be eligible to be paying taxes in another country. Is that right?
Oh, that is a great question.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you raised that. So of the two tests to qualify for the Foreign Earned Income Exclusion, one of them relies strictly on how many days you've been physically present outside the U.S. And the second one relies on kind of a bit more of a wishy-washy facts and circumstances determination, and it's called a bona fide residence test. So of the two tests, when I'm talking to digital nomads, most people are going to qualify under the physical presence test, and that is strictly counting days that you have spent outside of U.S. soil. You don't have to be a tax resident in another country. You don't have to really be a resident at all in another country. You can be a perpetual traveler. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is how many days have you physically been present in the U.S. within a calendar year period. And the number, just for clarity's sake, is in a calendar year period, if you've been physically present in the U.S. for more than 35 days, then you will not qualify. So 35 days is the max.
Okay. One of the big changes, obviously, that we're talking about so much in the news and all of that, as far as taxes go in the U.S., was the corporate tax. One of the big promises that Trump was saying he was going to lower the corporate income tax and let all this money come back, penalty free into the U.S. What does it look like? Does it look like they will lower the corporate tax? And if they do, is that how is that going to affect the people that we're talking about here?
Well, I'd say it might be the effect on kind of the digital nomads that I would work with, I guess, would be pretty limited. Just because the vast majority of people, again, just that I would personally deal with, and I'm assuming, but maybe that's not the case. I'm assuming more of your listeners might be kind of entrepreneurs, small business owners, maybe working through an LLC or some other disregarded entity. So all the changes to the corporate tax rate might not impact them as much. I think what the hope with the corporate tax changes would be to kind of repatriate some of that income that, say, some of your, like I live in Ireland, for example, and
Right.
there was the Apple, euro tax issue where there was essentially 13 billion euro of tax that apparently they owed to Ireland. So anyways, the big corporations that are going offshore to take advantage of some of these more advantageous regimes in other countries. I think that's the intent of it. And I don't think that a lot of that is going to impact your guys with, small businesses, Amazon, FBA, that type of stuff running through LLCs or otherwise.
Right. And I mean, they would incorporate in the U.S., right? Like, say, somewhere like Nevada. So wouldn't that affect the rate that they're paying?
Well, it depends on your structure, really. So again, just what the most kind of common structure that I tend to see, partially because I think for simplicity's sake, would be like an LLC, which again is a disregarded entity. So the LLC doesn't pay tax at a corporate level,
Right.
with unless there's certain elections that are filed, which are things that have to be considered and actively selected. But the default status would be that, so your LLC that you file in Nevada or Wyoming or wherever, that flows through to your personal tax return. So, and that gets some interesting interplay in terms of the foreign earned income exclusion, because again, that's comes down to the individual level. So the bottom line for me, I don't think that a lot of the big changes to the corporate tax rate are going to impact most entrepreneurs, but we'll see, and we'll keep an eye on it.
Right. And if I think that there's a lot of people, that, especially when they first start out, they're trying to get their business going, and it's rough. In the beginning, you're just trying to make money and all that, and you're just paying taxes how you always have, and you're not really thinking about how to save, or like actively. Even most accountants don't really, they just are there to kind of like file papers for the government. They're not really looking out for you or thinking proactively about what the best structure for you would be. And I think especially a lot of people, they think, well, I don't have the money for it. I don't know. I'm just trying to get this business going.
Yeah.
And at what point, I mean, somebody that's in that position, kind of like, at what point does it make sense to say, okay, now I need to, incorporate my business, or maybe an overseas entity or something like that? Are there any specific dollar amounts in either personally or for a business that it's time to contact, someone like you?
Well, that's a great question, and here's how I think about it. I think that essentially anyone almost at any level who is spending the majority of their year outside of the US and is earning income in any form, whether it's just through freelancing, whether it's through a sole proprietorship, whether it's through a business entity that you had set up in the US before you went digital nomad or international, anyone who falls into that category, I would say they will get tremendous value from seeking out a qualified tax professional who understands expat tax. Bottom line, because then it doesn't matter kind of what they've done in the past or what they have or haven't set up, because they need to know how the expat rules apply to them, and they need to make sure that they're applied correctly on their tax returns that get filed, because that will save them a lot of problems in the future. And then what you can do from there is you can find out if you need to make any changes to your structure, because we can talk about this, but for I think some of the people that you might be thinking about in your kind of previous example there, which is, I just wanted to get my business started. I just started making money and then things took off and I didn't really have time to make a plan for the legal structures. Those guys, a lot of times, could find a lot of benefit from making some deliberate decisions about their structuring. But they need to talk to somebody to figure that out. And I think that what I would say as well is, I just would advise people, don't let the tax piece stop you from obviously growing your business, because once you talk to a qualified tax professional, there's almost no problem that's unsolvable. And sometimes it would be ideal if you had talked to us 6 months ago or a year ago, but whenever you're ready, then that's the right time. But don't let that stop you from moving ahead and growing your business right now.
Yeah, that's great. I think that a lot of times, especially with Americans, the IRS is just kind of like, ugh, you just kind of curl up, like, I don't know, I don't want to deal with it.
This is it.
But yeah, right. But it's actually not. Maybe a lot of problems are solvable. A lot of things, even if you've done something wrong in the past, it can be fixed. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah, I have other accountants who have said the same thing. Why is it that, you've worked with a lot of these big companies and stuff, and I know you don't want to, I'm sure you don't want to like say anything negative about that, but I just, what is it that, like, it seems that it's so hard to find a tax preparer or accountant or, personal finance person that, like I was saying before, that it's willing to, like, be proactive about saving you money. It seems like they just, they're worried, I guess, about being fined or gone after or whatever, and they just kind of file, they're basically like clerks for the state, and like a lot of people are like, I'm paying you to try to help me out here, what I mean? But it seems to be so hard. I mean, do you know why that is?
That is a good question, and I think the answer will differ depending on what type of tax professional you are working with and kind of where you got them from. Because again, everyone who's out there working in this field is definitely doing their best, and it's not an easy profession, and there's a lot of continuing education that's required and all of that. But that being said, if you just go into your local mom and pop shop in your hometown, or even if one of some of the big international or nationally known U.S. tax preparing companies that are out there, the problem is the expat piece is such a niche that they just naturally, and in fairness, like, you wouldn't expect them to, but they just won't have the exposure to it and the experience with it to give you really specialized and proactive advice. So I think the challenge is, and it's difficult to connect the right tax professional with the right person, but that is really where I think your audience is going to find the biggest wins, is once they can connect with that person that knows the rules and knows the ins and outs of it, and can advise them on what are sensible risks to take and what are not, and then can kind of work with them in a more relationship and kind of a trusted advisor aspect, versus just the person that you dump your data on once a year and then never talk to again. That's how I ideally like to work with my clients anyways. And I know that other professionals like myself that are out there, that tends to be the model that we prefer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm pretty, I'm curious about, about the company you used to work for, and why, what made you decide to go on your own. It was kind of probably something you don't talk about too much, but I'm just, I'm curious about it. Have you ever seen this documentary? It's called Tax Free Tour. It's a Dutch documentary.
No, I would love to see it though.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I'll link it, but I would really recommend it. I've watched it a lot of times, and it's funny because they talk about the Big Four, and they kind of like they play scary music and stuff, and they're like, oh, these guys are, they go around and they're trying to undermine tax law throughout the world and stuff. And it's interesting. It's an interesting documentary. Even it doesn't matter what angle they're putting on it.
No, that's funny if that's the impression that documentary gave, because at least in my experience in the Big Four, it would almost be the opposite. We were extremely conservative and we were extremely risk averse. And I feel like I appreciate having that grounding, because it gives me kind of a healthy fear and respect for the tax authorities, and to kind of know what lines you absolutely don't want to cross. But kind of to answer your question, I really enjoyed my time in the Big Four. Like the area that I worked in was a lot of really great people.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. I just realized maybe you want to say what the Big Four is. I just realized maybe people don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, good point. So that generally when we talk about that, we're talking about the big public accounting firms. So it's KPMG, PwC, Deloitte, and Ernst & Young. And they would be, they'd audit the big companies in the world, and they also provide tax services and some advisory and consulting as well. So on the tax side of things, we would have worked with kind of big corporate global mobility programs. And what I saw there, which made me want to go and work independently, was if someone was, say, an expat with a big company, then they would have, one of the Big Four prepare their tax returns in country X and country Y. And then, we'd do all that for them, and that was great. But then the problem was, if they left that company and, left the assignment, say, they might not have that ongoing support. So I was just looking out there and going, there's a lot of expats that aren't with a big corporate global mobility program, and they can't afford paying Big Four fees, but they still need quality advice. And I just felt like that was an area that was kind of underserved in the market. Although I know there's a lot of great expat professionals that are out there, but I just felt like I could kind of contribute my skills in a bit more meaningful way, I suppose.
Okay, but had to have something to do with kind of lifestyle and stuff like that as well, right? I mean,
yes, it did. No, I ultimately, though, because I wanted to become a digital nomad myself, and I wanted to be able to spend some time in Ireland, some time home in Vancouver, where my family is, some time in the rest of Europe, potentially into Southeast Asia. Like I didn't want to be tied down to a certain number of, allowed vacation days per year. I just thought that was crazy. And I thought, because I'm working on my computer all the time anyways, why can't I just take my work with me wherever I go? Because I'm working with people that are international, and I just felt like a natural fit.
Right. And so how long have you been on your own now?
It has been, it'll be coming up on 6 months.
Okay.
So nice. It's still new enough, but it was something that I've really been wanting to do for a long time, and I've been really happy so far. So yeah.
Okay, and how's that been going? I mean, you like the new freedom that you have, and I guess it's only been Dublin that you've gone to so far, but you're planning on moving around, or what?
Yeah, that's right. So I was in Dublin because I had transferred to the Dublin office with my previous firm, and I just I decided that I think it kind of gave me the confidence, actually, kind of being over here and seeing how many like expats, even just in my circle of friends, that weren't getting the quality tax advice that they needed. And I just went, you know what, there's no time like the present, and made the jump. So it was nerve-wracking.
So you just quit, or what?
Yeah, I quit. It felt great. Okay.
Right. And I guess you quit and then you started the blog, or did you already have that?
I started my site a little bit in advance of quitting, and then I kind of ramped up on the side of allowing people to, because people can come to my site and they can book an individual consultation. So I started that after I had resigned, but I had gotten I wanted to kind of get a bit of a presence out there first, and just to see how I liked kind of writing and doing that sort of thing, and I'm really enjoying it.
Great. Yeah, I just like to talk to the guests about how they, got to where they are. Because a lot of people, they don't know how they would have start their own thing or a career like that. So they're, trying to think about the transition. How could they do something like this? So, what you did was great. Yeah, you got a specific a number of specific certifications. You went and got some experience at some very prestigious places, and then you just, I'm sure you saved some money and said, boom, let's do it. So that's great. Let's see, a good job. So, where are you planning on going now?
Well, I'm going home to Vancouver for a month in December, so be skiing in Whistler and hanging out with family. So that'll be good.
Cool. Right.
And then
how's Dublin?
Oh, Dublin is great. It's a really, really fun city, and I highly recommend it for people. But the challenge of it here is there is really a housing crisis on at the minute, and so it's not an easy place to find a place to live. But that aside, I would really recommend it for any of your listeners to come and visit because it's a lot of fun.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted you. You say where are you going after that? After Vancouver?
Well, for 2018, it's kind of up in the air at the minute, but I'm going to spend more time in the rest of Europe anyways, just because, as I said, Dublin being a difficult place to find housing. And I don't know if you've spent much time in Europe, but there's so many places that are really affordable, surprisingly so, like Croatia or Prague or Portugal.
Yeah. No, I love Europe. I spent a lot of time in Spain.
Yeah, I love Spain.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just I'm in Latin America, and so comparatively, it's much more affordable here than there.
Yeah.
But I just I love Europe. I just felt like kind of economically and things like that I had to move on. But I really enjoyed it there. So I did want to ask you. So I'm into vacation rentals right now. I've been spending a lot of time on that. I really like the business, and especially as it affects people that are living internationally, as far as hosting, as far as using it as a place to stay. And I noticed you had a couple articles on your blog about that.
Yeah,
so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. I thought it'd be something we could talk about. So first of all, first I want to talk about traveling, and then we can talk a little bit about hosting. You had an article all about traveling. So how is it that you've used some of the vacation rental sites such as Airbnb for yourself as you in your travels, and how can that help a location independent person?
Well, I personally like it a lot because I feel like it gives me, even if it's just the jumping off point to start kind of my research, because I like to plan ahead. And I know a lot of digital nomads would be comfortable with just landing in a city and not knowing where they're going to sleep that night. But I like to do my research, and I like to find out what neighborhoods are nice. And I like to find a neighborhood that has a yoga studio and things like this, right? So I like Airbnb for that because I can look in the maps, and then I can go and kind of do my little Google searches. And the other thing I like about Airbnb is when specifically, if you're looking for a month at a time, a lot of places will have a monthly discount. So you can kind of get a quick sense for how much you can get a place for a month. And then even if you might actually be able to beat that price eventually, I like to give myself kind of that baseline. So I know, okay, worst comes to worst, I'm going to be able to stay in Lisbon for €600 a month or whatever it is, just to kind of have that for my budgeting purposes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any other, I saw you had an article there. Are there any other kind of tips and stuff that you give people?
Well, I would say, I don't know. I wish I had another good resource besides Airbnb, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because
you tried VRBO and TripAdvisor and all these?
I give VRBO a look, but I should probably give it more of a look, to be honest with you.
Yeah, a lot of people, just to give you kind of the inside baseball, maybe a lot of people don't know, but VRBO they've made a lot of changes the last couple of years. And I'm going to have, pretty soon, I'm going to have another guest on, and he is a big time expert on the whole vacation rental industry, so we'll probably get into that. But anyways, a lot of people are moving away from VRBO because they have moved up their fees, and they're also making people charge through their platform and all kinds of other things. So it was a really great kind of for more long-term rentals and stuff. But there's less and less people on there. But there's a lot of different channels out there. Booking.com. You have TripAdvisor.
Yeah.
Even some vacation rentals at Expedia. And, you can go on Craigslist. And if you do just kind of a Google search, vacation rental, you can go to the individual websites. A lot of people, if they have a number of vacation rentals, they'll have their own website. And then you can call or contact them directly. And, instead of going through one of the websites, and that way you can negotiate. Usually the people like it a lot more because, a lot of the vacation rentals, they're in the hospitality business, so they want to, and maybe they're run by a, mom and pop or, a small team. So they really want to talk to you and make sure that you're happy and all that type of stuff. So that would be another thing, is just kind of search the area vacation rental and see if there's any individual websites or vacation rental owners out there that you can talk to.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And do you find, is it helpful to speak the local language? Because I think you're pretty fluent in Spanish, right?
Yeah, I speak Spanish. Well, the thing is I use Spanish if I'm renting something long term from a local person, because I'll get a better deal.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's going to be hard for somebody that's just like swooping in.
Yeah.
For me to do something, far away like that, it's going to be hard. Like, it would be a better strategy to come in maybe on a vacation rental for a month. And if you're planning on staying there 6 months or a year or something, 2 weeks, a month.
Yeah.
And then once you're on the ground, if you can speak the language, that'd be great. And then, to get the really good deals, Craigslist and just signs, just signs on houses and just talking to people.
Yeah.
A lot of times people won't even have signs up. And more than likely I've gotten really amazing deals. But probably if it's, if you're looking for really cheap, you're going to have to be comfortable. You might have to fix it up. So basically, I do that. I have, rented long-term places, very, very cheap. And then I will buy furniture and stuff and put it in there.
Oh.
But rent it out on long-term basis. And then I can stay there, and then I can also rent it out on Airbnb and stuff, and I'll run that by the owner. But yeah, then you can make a lot of money when you're not there as well.
Yeah, that's great. And that was something that I did. I've given up my apartment in Dublin in advance of being more location independent. But yeah, that's something I did with my place in Dublin. Whenever I would travel, is I would rent it out on Airbnb, and yeah, that worked out great. Actually, I was delighted with how easy that was.
Right. Yeah, as long as you have, I would say 2 main team, people. You need the housekeeper, and a maintenance man. That you can call up, because if you're not there, if something happens, that'll be a problem. But have some people that you can rely on, or I suppose there's probably companies that offer services like that. Definitely in the United States, they have all kinds of services popping up around this industry that will do everything. They will deliver stuff, they'll fix stuff, they'll clean, they'll do all this stuff. But that's not, in other countries outside the U.S. There's, like here where I am, there's none of that. So you got to just I'd have to rely on the people that I know.
That could almost be a potential business opportunity in some of these more popular locations. If there's going to be a lot of people coming and going, and if you had good contacts in the local area.
Oh yeah, I mean it's an incredible business now. I just shared an article a couple weeks ago. They did a big statistical analysis, and it looks like the number one host on Airbnb had a bunch of places in London, and he made £12 million last year.
Wow.
So, and then the number 2 was right behind him in Bali, and it was like £11 million in 1 year. So Yeah, there's definitely there's a lot of business going on there. And what I wanted to ask you about, since it looked like you've looked into that, from a tax, I've really not looked into that so much. So from a tax perspective, can this business be beneficial? What might be a way to set yourself up that this could benefit you tax-wise?
So I don't know about specific tax advantages as such, but I will say, as an example, my experience renting out my flat in Dublin on Airbnb, which I myself had rented out and I was subletting it. And I knew that I would have to report it for Irish taxes, but I didn't really know how to go about it because I'd never reported rental income in Ireland before. And it's always a bit more interesting, I suppose, when it's not a property that you yourself own. But as it turned out, Airbnb made it a bit easy for me because they sent me an email that said, by the way, we've reported this income to Irish Revenue. So then it didn't really give me any choice about it. Not that I would have, I would have always reported it, of course. But so I went and figured out exactly what I could claim for expenses. And for example, in Ireland, as it turned out, and I'd say the principle would probably be the same in most jurisdictions, is for a property that you rent, your rental expense prorated for the days that it's being used as a rental property can be claimed as an offset for a tax deduction. So what I did was, if I had rented out my place for 5 days out of a 30-day month, I would just take 5/30ths of my rent and utilities that I paid and claim that as an expense. So I'd say for people that are doing that in various places around the world, just be aware that you probably will have to report it to the local authorities, because when it's rental income that's earned in a country, it is sourced to that country. So generally speaking, you will have to report it there. But then once you've kept track of all of your expenses, you can use those to offset. So you shouldn't have to pay tax on just the gross income.
So what if you, like I was saying, that you fixed up a place, or you have, so can't you use all that money that you used as a deduction, and then you'd have a place that's all fixed up that you used tax-free money?
Yes. Well, now that's a bit interesting, because I suppose that would be a question of how you and the ultimate owner of the property have decided that all of your improvements are going to be valued. So let's say you bought some furniture that's worth $500 when you bought it, but then it depreciates, and then who gets the furniture when you ultimately move out of the property, that sort of thing. But yes, I'd say that you do have a basis to claim at least a portion of those costs. But generally speaking, when it is depreciable property, and this will vary from country to country, but just a kind of a good accounting principle is you can't expense 100% of the cost of depreciable property. You can really only expense how much is depreciated in that period.
Okay. Well, yeah, I just think it's a really interesting topic. I'm going to be doing some more about just the vacation rental thing, because, I've always been into real estate. I like it as, a source of cash flow. And I think that now, I don't know if people realize this, but the vacation rental industry has grown so much, and it's accessible to a lot of people now, not only as a traveler, but as a host.
Yes.
And in that way, you can actually make much more if you have an investment property. If you're set up, if you have a small team there, like I said, some people you trust in an area, you can make a lot more in rent with the vacation rentals than you can with a long-term rent. So obviously a little bit more work goes into it. But I tell you, especially where I am here in Mexico, because a lot of the labor that goes into it for the people that help me is very low. It's very profitable, the vacation rental thing, and it's really growing. There's a lot of technology that allows people to manage places, software and apps and stuff that you can do that's really incredible. So anyways, I think it's an interesting market to look at, especially for, as far as internationalization.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to that upcoming podcast episode of yours, because I think that the barriers to entry for, as you say, kind of the average person who wouldn't have necessarily thought of themselves as a real estate investor
to get in on that. And then I think it's a win-win, isn't it? Because it's providing a needed service to people that are looking for like short to medium term rentals. So I think it's great.
Yeah, I just talked to a guy last week. This guy I know in Spain. He borrowed some money, and he's a young guy. He's I think he's late 20s, and he borrowed some money from his parents, and he rented out some places, and he did the Airbnb thing, and he paid them back, and he now he has 70 places.
Wow!
So in 2 years, he has 70 places in this city in Spain, and so, anyways, lots of things going on. I ran across this article that I just wanted to mention here, and it kind of has to do with Canadian and American taxes here and digital nomad type stuff. It says, I don't know if you saw this a couple days ago. This is CBC News. It's a Canadian thing, and it says, court orders PayPal to give business account details to the CRA. It says here, the Federal Court of Canada has ordered the U.S.-based PayPal to hand over details about its business accounts customers to Canadian tax authorities. So anyways, it goes on. But yeah, so that's, I
did see that. And that's, as far as I know, that's a pretty unprecedented kind of data dump, because I think that historically they might have asked for kind of specific people that they might have had reasonable cause to suspect were, evading taxes. But what they've asked for here is they've asked for a broad spectrum of everybody. And so who knows how long it's going to take them to actually go through all of that information. But it's it's a very interesting and somewhat unsettling development potentially for some people.
Right. So I think that it's fair to assume the U.S. and the Canadian government, I mean, they have access to all the information on PayPal just like any other bank. Is that right?
Well, so PayPal would have reported its U.S. information to the IRS because that would be required.
Right.
But I think what's new here is asking PayPal, a U.S. company, to report to the CRA, which is the Canadian equivalent of the IRS.
Right.
So that
and everything.
Right there.
All information.
Whenever I read the article, it looked like they were asking for all business account owners. So. Yeah, that's a big group of people for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, is this kind of where things are going? I mean, I know that there was a couple of years ago, I covered a lot about what was going on with FATCA.
FATCA, yeah.
And I don't know. It's not in the news so much anymore, but that doesn't mean that it improved. It just kind of, that's how things happen. It's like they get worse, and then people forget about it. So. Is this where everything is going? Is just, all governments have control over or, access to everybody's accounts and information and stuff?
I'd say that is the trend that I have been seeing for a number of years, and I don't see reversing anytime soon. In fact, I only see information sharing between countries and demand information from companies to tax authorities. I only see that increasing, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember then they I forget which organization it was, but they took it up, and they said, oh, we're going to do GACTO, this is, it was like a global, global FACTA, which basically just all the UN countries and stuff would, have access to all the bank accounts, and then they'd share it all, and it's just like a global fishbowl of, you can't get out anywhere. So anyways, interesting thing going on there. So, if you're using PayPal, they are also a bank, and so don't think that they're not. They can't see what you're doing there. So be very careful. But as Grace said, nothing is unsolvable, right? So don't go. Don't be too afraid.
This is it, and really, ultimately, I feel like the fear of it hanging over your head and just not knowing what to do and the uncertainty, that's the biggest stress and the biggest kind of hurdle for people to overcome. Because I really honestly do believe that no matter how, if you've been delinquent for years, come to confession and you actually will feel better, because you'll come away with a plan of action going forward, and then you'll kind of know what steps to take. And it won't be the end of the world.
Yeah, that's funny you use that metaphor. So great. So yeah, I want to talk to. I think that we've covered a lot of stuff. I want to talk about your blog. You've covered a lot of stuff on there. What are your plans with that? What can people look out for there? Is there anything that you're we need to look out for in the future that you're doing?
Yeah, well, I'm just kind of interested in talking about sort of the intersection between location independence and financial independence, because I saw people out there in the kind of digital nomad space that weren't necessarily as focused on. So you might see articles that were like, here's how to save up $1,000 and go travel on it. I'm like, no. Let's talk actually building wealth here and building real financial security. So that's one thing that I'm interested in. And then just kind of seeing how that can play out across multiple countries, because then if you're at all interested in the financial independence sphere, a lot of that is very US specific, but it's for people that, have a house and have like just that 401k and that's it. And that one stable job. And that's great for those people. But I kind of want to speak to people who are taking a bit of a different and more international approach. So that's what I write about just out of my own personal interest. And then kind of professionally speaking, I would be, I have, the ability for people to go on and schedule consultations with me. So I'd be delighted to talk to anybody about any, tax issues or questions that they might have. I think that generally speaking, like if you've never talked to an expat tax professional, there's no time like the present. But then it doesn't hurt to kind of have a refresher if, say, your income streams are changing, or if you're thinking about spending more time in the US, or thinking about establishing residency in another country, or buying a property in another country, or just all of these kind of life changes. Anytime that something like that comes up, it's not a bad idea to consider booking a consultation with a tax professional in that year as well. Okay,
great. I did want to ask you about something. Especially lately, it's been kind of the du jour topic with cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin that are all going nuts. Have you worked with people with this? And I mean, how does that work? I mean, I know that I would say that a vast majority of people are just like not reporting anything.
Yeah.
I think I saw this article the other day. I don't have it pulled up right now, but it was Coinbase, and they did like a survey, and out of like 11,000 people or something like the accounts, I think like 700 had reported anything. So
yeah.
Anyways, so what do you think about that? How does that have to, how can, I know that it's considered, I believe it's, it's considered like a commodity to own it. So it's taxed as such.
Yeah. So what I think that the general agreement on just, as you say, the tax treatment would be if you're buying and selling, like when you sell, that would be when there would be a taxable event. So I would say, especially for any US people, as we know, like 100% worldwide income, all of that jazz. So you will want to report any capital gains. And as far as the thought leadership that I've been exposed to, I think that best practice will be your basis is the price that you paid for it, generally speaking. Your proceeds are what you sell it for. The difference is the capital gain. And unfortunately, that is taxable. I see no reason why long-term capital gains would not apply. So if you've held the asset for greater than 1 year prior to selling, but that's really where my thinking on it is at the minute. And I'd say that it just remains to be seen how many people are voluntarily putting that on their Schedule Ds on their tax returns.
Yeah. I don't know how much of an how much you know about cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin. But I'm just wondering, would it be possible in the future, even if it's not in the near future, but say in 5 years or something, that there could be a similar data dump like we were just talking about with PayPal with, cryptocurrencies, that somehow that could all be turned over? I know that there's a lot of talk about, central banks incorporating the blockchain. I read a Goldman Sachs report. It was like an internal thing from a friend of mine sent me, and they're talking about Bitcoin and stuff like that. and was saying that they saw the potential of it basically for central banks to use it, and they want to incorporate the blockchain and all that stuff into central banks, which is kind of against what the people, that started it wanted. It's kind of like the opposite. But anyways, so the point is like with something like that, I don't know, it's all kind of complicated, but could there be kind of a like a retroactive thing where they could, because it's not anonymous. We know that the blockchain and Bitcoin is not anonymous. It's synonymous. Yeah. Meaning there's a number attached to you, and once they know that number, then they know the transactions that you've done. So I'm just wondering, it seems impossible to most people that are out there, Bitcoin millionaires, whatever. Yeah. But I don't know if it's possible or not that there could be a similar type of data dump that we saw with PayPal.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I have to say I don't know enough about the blockchain technology capabilities to know if they demanded that kind of information, would there be any ability to just deny the request? I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. So it'll be very interesting to see that. Although obviously, like ultimately, I think that especially as a tax professional, what I would always tell my clients is it's always better to not see how much you can get away with. It's better to, be as compliant as you possibly can and really, get in front of things rather than wait for the data dump to happen, if you will, because you'll be that much better off and you won't have those sleepless nights if and when that data dump happens.
Well, now that I'm thinking about it, even if that did happen, I mean, there's so many people on this now. I mean, there'd be no way that the IRS could ever follow up on all that. It's just so ridiculous. Anyways, so yeah, this is a great conversation. I really hope that you visit some great places in the future. I'm here in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. If you want to come by here, this is
I've heard great things about that place. Actually,
it's the best city in the world. Didn't you know?
That's what I've heard.
No, I don't know about that, but it has been rated best city in the world 3 times the last, by these different organizations. And yeah, it's pretty nice. So if you ever swing by here, then let me know. And so I would recommend everybody go by your blog, and that is gracefullyexpat.com. Check it out. She's got a lot of blog posts on there. I'm sure she's going to be putting a lot more. And, if you're interested in working with her, she's got all the information there. Thank you very much for joining me, Grace.
Super. Thanks, James.
Absolutely. So let's keep in touch.
Absolutely.
Okay. Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.